Welcome to the Core Mission Podcast, where we discuss all things core life and health in the Salvation Army. In our inaugural episode, join host Major Doug Benner as we sit down with Chief Secretary John Chamness for an insightful conversation on embracing innovation and the courage to try new things. Stay tuned for future episodes where we delve into real stories and lived experiences from the front line of Salvation Army Corps, inspiring you to build a culture of discipleship at your church. This is the Core Mission Podcast.
Well, hello, I'm Major Doug Benner from the Core Mission Department, and this is another one of our podcasts. And I'm so pleased today to have the Chief Secretary, Colonel John Chamness, joining us, and looking forward to a conversation with you, Colonel, today. So as we begin, you are appointed as the Chief Secretary for the Canada and Bermuda Territory. That sounds like a very ominous responsibility, an ominous appointment. I don't want to presume that all of our listeners know or understand what a Chief Secretary does. So tell us a little bit about what it means to be the Chief Secretary in a territory the size of ours. What does a Chief Secretary do?
Well, great. First of all, Doug, thank you for inviting me and having me here today. And for those out in listening land, thank you for tuning in today. I look forward to meeting you. Doug, you know, we have just enjoyed our first 8-9 months here in Canada. We've been from coast to coast already. We've seen the expression of the Salvation Army in many different places, and we're just excited and so happy to be here. People have been incredibly generous towards us and welcoming us to this territory, and so thank you for saving us from Southern California. We're happy to be here in the Canada and Bermuda territory. So what does a Chief Secretary do? That's a great question. And as I've been in my role, as I said, about 9 months now, the Chief Secretary in the Canada and Bermuda Territory is both the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the CEO. So it's kind of a mixture of both of those kind of roles that we would know in a corporate world, where the CEO makes decisions about the day-to-day operations of the organization. So everything from property, business, HR, all of the systems that we have as an organization fall under my responsibility to ensure that they work well and that through those systems, we're able to better minister in our communities across the territory.
So, Colonel, that sounds like a great deal of responsibility and a great deal of authority, but I also realize that responsibility that you carry now comes with a long journey of ministry and mission behind it. So tell us a little bit about your journey of officership and ministry and where you've served and some of the things that you and your good wife have done.
Well, Doug, it has been an incredible 35 years. So this June, we will celebrate 35 years of officership. I joined the Army just a year or two before. I went to training college. In fact, I was enrolled as a soldier at Easter, and I found myself in training college that August. So my experience leading into training college was a very short experience. I joined the Army not realizing that I would see the world, and I've been so privileged, over the past 35 years to experience really a wide breadth of Salvation Army ministry. When we were first commissioned, my wife and I, at that point, still single officers, were sent to Hawaii. We were married a year later. We spent our first 13 years of officership in Hawaii and the Marshall Islands. So part of our 13 years there, 4 years were spent in a place called Micronesia, a very small group of islands out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where we really learned a lot during that 4 years experience in the Marshall Islands. We served as DYSs, DSs. We went to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where we built a Kroc Center, which was an amazing experience for me from the ground up.
Yes.
Nothing was there. There was no Salvation Army there in Coeur d'Alene when we arrived. It was my wife, myself, and our 3 kids, and that was it. That was the Salvation Army in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And from that, we built not only the building, but an advisory board. We built the Corps, started with a small group meeting in our home that grew to about 30 meeting in a library. And when we opened the doors to the Kroc, our first Sunday, we had 400 on Sunday.
Wow.
And it was just an amazing experience to be a part of something like that. From there, we went as divisional leaders to Hawaii for 6 years, and then to Southern California, where we merged 2 divisions. So we've just experienced that here in Canada, where we've merged, gone from 8 divisions to 4 divisions. So fortunately, we had that experience before we came, so we could offer, our support to the divisions that were undergoing this merging together. And we served for 5 years in Southern California under some really incredibly difficult circumstances, not only the merge, but also leading through COVID.
Right.
And now we are here. So
Yeah.
it's been great.
A great journey. And no doubt God has been faithful through all of that. We want to focus a little bit today, Colonel, on core life and core health, church life, church health. And certainly all of the research that we're reading recently over recent years and even before COVID, the statistics that we're learning about would suggest that the church attendance is declining across denominations across North America. What do you believe are some of the primary reasons why people just aren't going to church, coming to church as frequently or as much as we did in days gone by?
So first of all, I want to make a disclaimer. I am not an expert on church growth. I certainly have read a lot. I've listened to a lot of different podcasts and other people talk about what they've done and how they've done it. We have had experience where we've grown core in Micronesia. We planted, I believe, about 5 cores while we were there. I mean, we certainly did that with the support of those that we put in charge of those locations.
Right.
We grew the Coeur d'Alene core from nothing to, when we left, we had about 300 on Sunday morning, in attendance on Sunday morning. So certainly we do have some experience in at least what we've done and how that has worked. I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I don't think this just happened because of COVID. I think this was beginning to happen long before COVID hit. I think COVID, like so many other things, accelerated the decline in attendance at church.
Yep.
So I reflect back to something I read from William Booth. As we know, William Booth started or had this vision of farm colonies where people that he had encountered in England, that they would maybe get this opportunity to be part of farm colonies. And one thing that he said in the farm colonies is that people would work for 6 days and they would have the 7th day off, or they would have Sunday off. But he said people should not be forced to go to church on Sunday. We should make church so attractive, that we should make it so compelling, that we should make it so good that we would not have to force people to come to church. They would want to come to church.
Right.
And I think that's something we as the church, not just the Salvation Army, what's occurring right now in the church is occurring across North America. It began in Europe and it's made its way across the Atlantic to the Americas. And it's something across North America that the church is experiencing a decline in attendance. And I think it has to do with a lot more than just tweaking things here or fixing things there. I think the church really needs to reflect on how we do church, what we say in church, the experience that people have when they come to church. I mean, look at one of the things that Lonnie and I have done over the years is that on our vacations, we will often go to visit another church to see how they do it, to see what are the things that perhaps we might be able to learn from somebody else. And we typically try to pick churches that maybe are experiencing growth or experiencing something that would say there's something really good happening there and let's go check it out. Let's be a part of this. And that experience from learning from others has been really helpful to us. Now, sometimes I hear people say in the Salvation Army, well, that's not the Salvation Army. But I guess I would challenge people about that comment, is that William Booth was willing to use whatever means possible to draw a crowd, to gather people together so that he could preach the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And he said, I would stand on my head and ring a timbrel with his feet if that's what it took to draw a crowd. And so I think we need to go back and relook at how we do church. Are we still doing church like we did in the 1950s and 60s and 70s? And do we need to look at perhaps overhauling how we present Sunday morning? That's not to say that we would compromise our message. That's not to say that we would, somehow water down our message. Not at all. In fact, I think today, I think that people are looking for and wanting not just the 10 or 15 minute little devotional message on Sundays. They're looking for some real meat. They're looking for people to teach directly from the Word of God. And what does God say? I don't care what you say, Pastor. I want to hear what Jesus says.
Yeah.
I want to hear what God says.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's probably one of the places that I would start is looking at ourselves and saying, is there something that we could do to not compromise our message, to not follow after maybe things that would not be really helpful to the church today. I'm reminded of a friend of mine. His name is Jim Sparks, and Jim Sparks is a Salvationist out in the West. And he would often come and teach at a program we had in Hawaii called Revolution Hawaii.
Right.
And a part of the week that Jim would talk with these young Salvationists about was that experience that we have when we come to church. And so he would take this group, he would first have them read through a book called Church Marketing 101.
Okay.
And now I know lots of people might say, church marketing, that's evil, that's wrong. But really what the premise of this book is all about is that you market yourself whether you intend to or not. And oftentimes our unintended consequences of thinking that we're not marketing ourselves is that we don't really take care of those things that people notice when they come into our buildings or
Right.
when they approach us. So he took this group, he took them out to the Mormon temple because he wanted them to experience a completely different church. And they experienced that. Yeah. And they felt the uncomfortableness of going into something that's not Christian on a Sunday
Right.
and experiencing that.
Yep.
He also took them to a bar and how uncomfortable that was. And the point was that when people visit our cores on Sunday morning, if they have not been regular church attenders or if they don't attend the Salvation Army Church,
Right.
they might feel uncomfortable. We might do things that they would go, I don't get that, or I don't understand that, or why do they do that, or whatever that might be. So I think we really need to think through how we present. Are we just trying to reach those people that are currently there? Or are we trying to reach people that aren't there? And I'm reminded of our middle name, the Salvation Army.
Yes.
And one of the primary focuses of the Salvation Army should be evangelism. And I think we've become very comfortable in our congregations today. And I hope I actually don't hope I'm not offending.
No.
I think it's okay to offend when we're offending like this, right? Because we're talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ and people going to hell. And if we, the Salvation Army, don't do what God called William Booth and the Salvation Army to do, then we have fallen short of that mission that God has called us to. God did not call the Salvation Army just to take care of those that were inside of our church, just to be
Right.
a place where a group, a club would huddle on Sunday mornings.
Right.
He wanted to see the Salvation Army as that vehicle, that instrument, that church that would bring about the second coming of Christ.
Yes.
And to do that, we can't be comfortable in our churches. We can't just sit back and say, we'll let somebody else do that. We'll let the corps officer do that, or we'll let another church do that. God called the Salvation Army to the submerged tent, to the least, to the lost, and to the hurting of our world.
Yes.
And I think there is this call for the Army to return to our roots, to that which God has called us to. Now, we still need to take care of those who are in our congregations.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
not to say that. But I think we've lost our way a bit in the Salvation Army.
Yes.
And I think God is saying, please come back to me, to your first love as a Salvation Army, and let's re-engage in that ministry of outreach to the communities around us.
Absolutely.
Do we even know who lives around our core buildings? Have we lost contact with our neighbors and with those that daily, live in the communities around us? And then so I think it's incumbent upon not just the officer, because the Salvation Army, we were lay-led more so than being officer-led.
Right.
We are an organization of lay leaders who should be intimately involved in the leadership of the Salvation Army. So how do we begin to recapture that passion for the least and the lost
Absolutely.
in our communities.
I listened to one of our Corps officers from our territory just yesterday speak about wanting to put the salvation back in the Salvation Army. And that's the emphasis of the Corps that they're leading right now. And that kind of excited me. Colonel, you used two terms just a moment ago. You talked about tweaking, but you also talked about overhauling. Those are two ends of the spectrum in my mind. So as you think about how we're doing church and how we're ministering in some of our core settings and some of our communities, what are some of the things that perhaps we need to tweak, little changes, but what are the things that maybe need more of an overhaul, a major shift in emphasis or in action or in budget? Or
Great question, Doug. I think there's probably two things here. One is that there are many really good things happening in many of our corps across the country, and we've seen that.
Yes.
Almost every weekend we're out visiting a different corps around the territory, and we have seen some fantastic things happening. So I don't want to discount that or say that it isn't happening, because it is happening in many places.
yes,
I also think there are core principles that we hang on to, and that those never get thrown out or changed or tweaked. That there's these core principles that we understand and know, and they continue to be a part of our ethos as a Salvation Army. We are unique, I think, in some things from other denominations that I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up our passion for the least and the lost and the last.
right.
That is, I think, who God has called the Salvation Army specifically to. So are we still, in all of our corps across the territory, are we still welcoming the least, the lost, and the last? Are they still a part of who we are? Are we willing to allow them to come and sit in our pews and be a part of our family? I think back to the day when William Booth started the Salvation Army, and the fact that when he took those that he was getting saved of that day and taking them to the existing church wouldn't welcome them.
Right.
He didn't want them to be part of their congregation. So
Back
that
pews.
William Booth said,
Yeah.
then I guess we need to start a Salvation Army.
Right.
I would hate for there to be a new Salvation Army that starts simply because we've lost that passion for the least and the lost and the last. So I guess I would hesitate to share, concrete examples of what needs to change, because each community might be different. What works in one place might not work in another. I guess I would suggest, Doug, that we be open, that every one of our congregations be open to what it is that God is already doing in that community, and they simply follow what God is doing in that community.
Right.
So if it means that we let go of this because of this, then we do that.
Okay.
I guess I would say, Doug, that it's from the territorial commander on down. Corps officers and congregations have the freedom to try new things. I don't think we have to hold on to some of these things that we've held on from the past just because that's what we've always done. And I've heard that before. Well, we've always done it that way.
Right.
Well, perhaps it's time for us to try some different things. Still with the emphasis on evangelism, still on the emphasis of discipleship and growing people and helping them to become those new creations in Christ. But we can do it in different ways, in different styles. Again, the message can't change. Our 11 doctrines are 11 doctrines, and
Right.
we're not going to change those.
And they're solid.
And they are. I mean, if you look at those 11 doctrines, most other churches reflect, those doctrines. It might be tweaking the time you meet. So do we all have to meet on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock? Now, for some, that's going to work. But in a day when we have menu options, when we go to this event or that event, we can choose the times that we want to participate. So maybe our corps need to look at offering Sunday worship on Saturday, on Friday, or on Wednesday. Or maybe it's offered several times on Sunday, not just once on Sunday. For families who have their kids in hockey. I was going to say soccer, but I'm in Canada. So
It's hockey.
it's
Yes.
hockey here, right?
Yeah.
So, for those families that still want to be a part of church, if we only offer one time during the week when they can go to church, and it's on Sunday morning 11, and they have hockey matches at Sunday morning at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, well, that's going to be difficult for them. And so I would encourage the family to do the hockey, but I would also want them to come to church. So
Right.
how can we offer more opportunities for people to come and worship?
Yeah.
I think we need to do something like that.
I'm hearing you talk about innovation and about creativity and about recognizing needs within your community, within your church family, and adapting as needed. So, tell us a bit more, or dig a little deeper in this idea of innovative approaches that I'm hearing you say Corps officers have permission to make, to try new things, to take new initiatives, to be creative in how they are doing mission in their communities.
Yeah, great question, Doug. So in our churchwell mission statement, it actually indicates on that we are an innovative partner.
Yeah.
We look for innovative partnerships.
Yeah.
The founding of any organization is always, it always includes innovation. You look at the Army and what we did back 160 years ago, a lot of the things that we did were very innovative, and the people that were in other churches or outside the church were very condemning of the Salvation Army for some of the things that we did. What did we do? We used bar tunes that were familiar to the common man to reach the common man. Well, we could still do that today, taking the music of today instead of the music of yesterday to reach the people of today. So that's a simple thing.
Sure.
Music is such a big part of who we are that should be a part of what we look at doing. I'm trying to think of other innovative things that we can do, but I think it's simply to say that from territorial headquarters, we're saying to corps and corps officers and to officers across the territory, we are open to innovation. We
Right.
want to see what they come up with, the ideas that they want to put forward. We even have an innovation grant, I believe,
Yes.
for people looking potentially at starting something new.
Yep.
So, what could that be? What would that look like? I would leave that really up to the individual officers and corps across the territory to say, man, could we do this? And, we'd really want them to flush that out and make sure that there's really some concrete things there, that some meat on it to really do something in that way. But we want to encourage innovation. We want to encourage this idea that we can do things differently than what we've done in the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard many times over my 40 years, oh, well, THQ would never let us do that, or DHQ would never give us permission. So I'm hearing you say differently.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most freeing things for me as a young officer was when then, at that time, Major Joel Nolan, who was my divisional commander in Hawaii, he said, I want to free the officers of this division up to do whatever is necessary to win people to Christ. And he says, I don't care how you do that, as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But it was so freeing to me as a young officer, because all I'd heard in the very short time before I became an officer is, oh, I wouldn't be an officer because you can't do this and you can't do that. And, DHQ says no to everything and THQ says no to everything. I found it just the opposite. That we are giving permission for people to try something new.
Amen.
And I would really challenge people to do that. What is it that you can do in your community? Don't wait for the division, don't wait for the territory to give you permission. If it's God leading you, get started and go and do it. And I've always found that in the places that I've been, that DHQ has never said no to me as long as I was, as long as things were growing, as long as there was fruit from the ministry, then I never got a no. I mean, we built this Kroc Center in Coeur d'Alene, and we designed all the programs and everything else, and never once had DHQ or THQ said no. They never said no about anything. We had a recording studio. We had all sorts of different types of classes throughout the building. We had this performing arts theater where the symphony would meet and where the local Christian youth theater would meet. So I find that as long as you're able to produce fruit from whatever innovation that you're looking at doing, I think you're going to find it difficult for anybody to say no to something like that.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I recognize that Corps officers have a lot of demands on their time, on their energy, on their family life. And if we're being creative and if we're trying new things, that could potentially just add to an already busy calendar, an already over-scheduled week or month. So what kind of courage does a Corps officer need, and what kind of permission does a Corps officer need to maybe stop doing some of the old things that we've always done in a Corps setting?
Yeah, so Doug, I think there's a really great principle in the business world or in the church world, anywhere, that if you're going to start something new, that you're going to have to stop something that you were doing.
Okay.
I think that this is an important place where a Corps officer would want to be speaking with their divisional commander and saying, hey, I've got this idea, I want to do this, but in order to do this, I'm going to need to let something go. And here's this thing that we've been doing for a long time, and here's the evidence or the lack of evidence in terms of fruit for this thing.
Fruit.
So
Right.
we would like to give up this so that we can do this. And my bet is that every divisional commander across this territory would say, go for it.
Yeah.
Certainly you're not going to have THQ say no, but I think this is a part of the discussion that we would always want to have with the divisional commander and your area commander, just to keep them informed and to work with them in partnership to say, we need to let this go so that we can do this. And I think we're at that point where I've even heard from the territorial commander. He has said, we want to give permission for people to stop doing something to start doing something that will produce fruit.
And fruit. Fruit is the key there, hey? So if some of the things that are taking up a lot of time and energy in our schedules are not bearing fruit, they're not missionally effective, then Corps officers and Corps leaders need to start getting innovative, start getting creative, start being sensitive to needs in the community. And how can we then start doing something that is missionally effective?
Yeah.
How can we take a risk to try something and maybe fail? It might not work.
Yeah, we want to give permission for people to fail. You know, every inventor, everybody that's had any success has always had numerous failures. I was listening to Warren Buffett talk last night. He was being interviewed by somebody along with Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett talked about, some of the failures that he had. But he says, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to have failure. Anytime you're going to succeed at something in life, there's always going to be a cost. There's always going to be a failure. So, if we just sit waiting around for something to happen, it's never going to happen.
Right.
So you've got to take that step. But I would suggest, we've always tried to do in different communities is to get to know the community. We'd get to know the mayor. We'd get to know other leaders in the community. We'd be a part of the pastoral, I forget even what you call them. But
Ministerial.
There we go, ministerial association.
Right.
So that we could make sure before we started something or initiated something new, is that we'd make sure it's not just us that was
Right.
thinking about this. But
Right.
we would even meet with maybe the principal from a school and find out, hey, what are the difficult things that you're experiencing? How can we as the Salvation Army support you and your teachers and your school? You'll be surprised at the response you get from principals. They'll go, I'm so glad you're here. We've got this that we're dealing with right now.
I
Coeur d'Alene,
could tell you a story from my ministry.
there was a high rate of suicide in our community. And so we met with the middle school principals and the high school principals, said, what can we do to support and help? We put together a resource team that would go speak at assemblies. They would have the Salvation Army come and speak at their assemblies about these different topics. And then we brought in a national speaker who spoke to all the teachers about what the teachers could do. So we resourced teachers and parents about this issue of suicide and how they could really understand the signs, but then also deal with this issue. It made a huge impact on that community because we were able to partner with parents and with teachers and with the school district on how to do something that really made a difference for that community.
And that would be missionally effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So if Corps officers and leaders are thinking creatively and with innovation and they're assessing their communities and they're wanting to try something new, there's no doubt going to be some barriers that they're going to come up against, some opposition. How would you speak wisdom or encouragement to a Corps officer who's maybe facing a barrier, an obstacle, struggling to get through this, struggling to get it off the ground?
So I apologize for speaking of the Kroc Center, but I think there's so many examples that we learned from this experience that it has helped me immensely as an officer to understand how a lot of things like this work. So you think that if the Salvation Army is coming into this community and bringing basically $40 million, that people would just embrace that and welcome and say, glad you're here.
Bring it on.
And many did. But every day we had opposition to this center. Every day we had people speaking out against us.
Wow.
Headlines in the newspaper, Dirtgate at the Kroc Center was one of them. I won't even mention some of the others because we can't have them on air. But it was these types of things that we were dealing with on a constant basis. But I also, I was challenged by one of our donors. He said, we were asking this foundation for $1 million. And he goes, John, I think this is a departure from your mission as the Salvation Army. So right now, I'm not convinced that this Kroc Center is really central to the mission of the Salvation Army. So you're gonna have to prove to me that this is central to the Army's mission before, we'll give you this $1 million. So I had to go back and I had to do my homework. I had to do a lot of work to really think through what this would look like and why this thing that we were building was really central to the gospel and to the mission of the Salvation Army, to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human needs in his name without discrimination. How did that fit into this center with swimming pools and fitness center and gymnasiums and performing arts theater and recording studio and climbing wall, just go on and on and on.
Right.
But I was finally able to come back and speak to this foundation about how I felt this was going to fulfill the mission of the Salvation Army in this community. The reality was when we opened that center, we had 5,000 individuals who were on scholarship. And those families would have never had the opportunity to be a part of a center like this because they couldn't afford the membership fee. But because we're able to do that through a scholarship fund, and through that fund, provide all of these things that families needed to get back on their feet again. So when they came into the Kroc Center, it wasn't just about learning how to swim or losing weight or getting fit or whatever it might be. It was really more about the deeper issues that we dealt with in the individuals' lives that came through that door. And it was really cool to see the transformation that was taking place in these people's lives because a donor had challenged me about how this would fit the Salvation Army. I also think sometimes we just come up with a quick little page about what it is that we're going to do without really doing our homework.
Right.
And I think, in almost everything that we did there at the Coeur d'Alene Kroc, we had to do a lot of work to validate our ideas and so show that we could not only support them initially, but in the long term.
Right.
It took a lot of work to do that. We also had a lot of Krocs that came to us, and we'd captured some different ideas, value statements and mission statement about who we are and what we were going to do. We'd come up with this whole program to catch our employees not doing something wrong, but doing something right, following this principle that Disney utilizes. And we've done all these really great things to really create this incredible culture at our Kroc Center. Well, people wanted to come and just steal our stuff and take it back and use it. And I said, you can't do that. I mean, you can take this stuff, but until you've actually worked through it, until you've put the blood, sweat, and tears
Right.
into this, until it becomes yours, you can't just take what we've developed and just somehow bring it into your center and it will be just like it is here. We had to work through that.
It's the process.
It is that process. It is
Yeah.
the time that it takes to really come to those conclusions that best fit your current location.
Right.
So,
Right. There's a lot of change happening in our world today, and we've referenced some of that, but there's changes within our own organization. There's changes in the communities that we live in. The world is coming to our doorsteps. Changes in technology. How do Corps officers deal with this constant rate of change as they're trying to be innovative, as they're trying to stay mission focused, as they're maybe trying to determine what we should prune or what we should purge, just in the midst of all of the change that's swirling around us? How do Corps officers face that? What can we do to support Corps officers in the midst of that constant change?
okay, that'll take about 3 hours. to
Okay,
do.
so can we extend the length of this a little bit?
No. First of all, I think that there always needs, in any successful organization, a part of that culture is a culture of change. Any organization that stays static will die. You know, you just look at the bell curve, and any organization that does not change, is not willing to change, that is against change, that organization will die. I mean, that's, you can just look at every organization out there that, I mean, look at JCPenney's and Sears, Kmart, Kodak, all these organizations that at one time were the leaders in their industry. I mean, Sears was ahead of its time in terms of, you know, having this catalog where
Yes.
you could order out of.
Yes.
It's now, but now Amazon took over because Sears stopped being innovative and they stopped having this culture of change. Look at Kodak, who was ahead of their times in terms of you take a picture and it's instantly there, you know, and they stopped developing that technology and they died.
Blockbuster Video is another one. Yes.
Yeah. So you could name the different institutions out there, and I think the church is at that same risk. If we don't have this culture of change, if we're not willing to innovate, if we're not willing to look at what we do and to adjust, or to look at maybe what's coming, that there's a real danger for us in that. At the same time, I get it. We loved being Corps officers. We were Corps officers for 15 years, and now we've been headquarters officers for, I believe, coming up to 19 years now. But we absolutely love the Corps, and we get how difficult and how challenging it is for Corps officers. So for you out there in the field, thank you.
Yeah.
What you do every day is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I would much rather be a Corps officer than a chief secretary. There's just something
We could
about it.
probably arrange that.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when I was called sitting in the balcony of Seattle Temple Corps on a Sunday morning all by myself, just thinking about being a Corps officer and having that ability to be there in amongst the people. But what our Corps officers do are heroic. You know, the job that you do every day, you show up, you tend to your flock, you work with very difficult circumstances in very trying times. What you do is amazing, and you need to know that and hear that. When the territorial commander and I meet every day, we talk about this often. And you should know that coming from the leadership of this territory, we're so proud of you and we love what you do. So keep doing it.
Amen.
And
Thank you,
for
Colonel.
what you do.
Thank you. That's a beautiful word, and our Corps officers do need to hear how highly valued
Yeah.
they are for the work that they do day in and day out. Colonel, this has been so rich and so valuable. Thank you. We've talked about mission and staying focused on mission. We've talked about managing change and facing barriers. We've talked about being innovative and being creative. And we've talked about figuring out how to purge, how to prune things that aren't effective. As we wrap up our podcast today, is there one final word of encouragement that you would give to some of our leaders who are out there day in, day out, in the trenches, on the front lines, serving so faithfully. What would be a final word of encouragement for them?
We would rather that you do 2 or 3 things very well and that demonstrate real fruit instead of doing 10 things that aren't done very well, or you're too exhausted to do them well because
Brilliant.
you just can't keep all the plates spinning. I'm always reminded of that
Yes.
that show where the guy keeps the plates spinning, and at some point you can't, and the plates start to crash. And I think for many of us during COVID, that is something that all of us experienced.
Felt a lot of crashing.
The trauma, the pain, all of the things that came along with COVID. And personally, I struggled through COVID, trying to deal with all the different things that we were trying to keep doing. So my encouragement to all of you is to find those few things, those couple things that you can do well. Those 2 or 3 things that would bring you life, bring your congregation life, do them really well. Invest a lot in those, and then give them away for somebody else to do. And then you can pick up a couple of new things to start over on.
Colonel, that is, I think, very liberating to hear for a Corps officer. Find a couple of things that I can do really well and really effectively and really make a kingdom difference and a mission impact, and do them well.
Yeah.
And don't try and keep all the plates spinning.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. Can't do it. Colonel, thank you for your time today. This has just been so appreciated. We know you're a busy man, but we also know a little more about your heart for ministry and mission after this conversation today. And I value that, and I believe our listeners will value that as well. So thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you for our listeners, and we hope that something that has been shared today has sparked something in your heart that will help you to make a kingdom difference and a mission impact in your ministry wherever you're serving. This is Doug Binner with the Corps Mission Department. Thanks for joining us.